You know, I've been feeling pretty good about my art lately, and I figured, you know, why not just completely destroy that and tear some of my old work apart? Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing well. Today I thought it would be fun, interesting if we took a look back at some of my old artwork and critique it. I feel like all artists have, you know, those special paintings that they thought turned out really awesome and they just always really loved, and a lot of the time when you look back at those you realize that they really were not as good as you remembered. And I figured I would take that journey through those past artworks on camera, as you do. No, but I actually did something like this very similar on my prop shop channel, and it was really cool to look back at all of the different costumes and props and stuff that I had made, so I thought it'd be fun to look back at some old artwork on here as well. The plan for this, I'm going to go on my old DeviantArt account. I mean, it is still technically my current one, I just unfortunately don't post there that much anymore, I just don't have the time for it. And I figured I would go back through the traditional art folder, which is of course what I'm generally doing now, and just, you know, look at what's there and talk about it, and I guess see what my thoughts are on those pieces now. I obviously thought they were reasonable pieces then, considering I was willing to post them on the internet. Scooch over here so that we can actually put the artwork here that I'm talking about, and of course I'm looking at my phone for a cheat sheet, so excuse me looking down all the time. I guess we'll start with this one. This is clearly a variety of Lisbeth Salander portraits, both from the American and Swedish Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. This is actually probably a really good example of somewhere to start, because I did this when I was originally first really getting into focusing more on art, I guess. I spent a ton of time on this. I mean, it is 12 individual portraits, so that's going to take somebody a lot of time. The portraits themselves, I know, are colored pencil, good old Prismacolors, still the same set that I use today, and the background was just like a cool gray marker or something. Yeah, I feel like this suffers with a lot of the things that a younger artist would struggle with, so the likeness isn't really there on a lot of these. There's some interesting anatomy choices on a few of these. Unfortunately, this is a fairly unique looking character, you know, piercings, mohawks, everything, so even if the likeness isn't really there, you probably can still tell who it is because of those more unique features. I do remember somewhat doing this, and I know I was way more concerned with getting the color as close as possible as opposed to the value. So a lot of these I feel like are pretty flat. Definitely not my best work. It's pretty okay, I would say, for that age and time point, considering I don't think I'd really done a lot of more realistic portraits then. So yeah, an okay place to start, I guess. I'm sure it's just going to be downhill from there. Around this time I was way more focused, I would say, on the prop making papercraft aspect, so there's like really weird time jumps where my skills were possibly progressing more in a medium that was not necessarily two-dimensional traditional art, but I wanted to just focus on that since that is what I tend to gravitate and stick to, so keeping the critiques within the same line of what I would generally do now I figured would be a good thing. So the next piece that's like a finished piece on this and not just a sketch is this, which is Time Will Tell, which I still really love. It is possibly one of my most famous paintings if you are like into that time frame, the Warehouse 13 fandom kind of thing. This one really blew up for me, and it's actually still my screensaver on my phone, which I would show you. It's actually a picture of it. There's quite a long-winded story for this piece, but this actually ended up being a part of a series which I was not planning, but because this did so well, I mean, I have no idea what on earth this concept was, but I think it's pretty cool. I don't hate the idea. I have such a sentimental attachment to this now that even if there was something funky going on, I mean, her face looks a little distorted if I was going for like a completely perfectly symmetrical look. It's a little skewed to one side, but the sentimental attachment to this is so strong for me. I'm really okay with this piece. Here we have a Hannibal piece. This is actually in technically a sketchbook, but that sketchbook is very much just like smaller finished pieces of art. Yeah, I don't think this is terrible. This is when I was starting to try out, I forget who it was, but there was a few illustrators I was really into that did the like more stark line art, like acrylic ink, very like black and obvious line art with still realism and just like watercolor over top. There was a few people that I was really into, and so I started to try that out and see what I could do, and so I clearly tried this Hannibal thing, and yeah, the likeness isn't like super great, but I think I was also with these messing a little around with the realism aspect and just not really cartoonifying them, but I feel like his eyes are too large looking at this, and the highlights are very stark in the eyes, but that is somewhat a stylistic choice, and I still do this, and even if it isn't particularly realistic, it is a stylistic choice for me to have those really stark highlights. So yeah, the splashes are, you know, pretty there. The around him is supposed to be antlers, which I'm not sure if they really come across now, and they probably could have been a little more dimensional so that they stood out from him. But yeah, I'm pretty okay with this. It's a pretty typical, simple portrait sketch. This is, again, somewhat along the lines of that. Again, the realism, I don't remember if I was trying to have them look more like the actual people, or that was just what I was going for, so sorry past me for tearing into you because I don't remember. But I really like the frame on this one. The stark highlights on the grappling hook and the other gun type of mechanism in the bottom, they are stark, but they just really make it pop, and I know I spent forever on that like a Baroque frame, and the definition is still really nice on it. It's a little scratchy in a few areas, but overall I still really like this piece. I like doing these kind of really intense line art portraits that are then just sort of colored in with watercolor. I still am really into it and would be willing to still do those. I mean, my art's been like a mess in consistency for past few years or so, so that's on me, but I still really enjoy that acrylic ink line art and watercolor look. Again, a girl with a dragon. This, I had like a girl with a dragon tattoo like issue, not an issue. I did a lot of artwork, and I'm sure like what I'm going to show you is probably not even like 5% of what I ended up doing. So this piece made it on here. This is also somewhat of a sketch, but it is more finished, and again is that line art portrait style that I was going for then with the watercolor. It's a little strange of a concept, but the likeness in this one I feel like is much better than the other two. So if I was going for that more realistic likeness, this definitely hit it. It's a little strange composition-wise, just sort of having her head stuck in the dragon. It's not something I would necessarily do now because it's a little cut off, but you know, that could be a cool look for a lot of people. The dragon, pretty okay. The scales, there's a lot of scales and detail on that dragon. So, you know, a little weird concept-wise, but okay. And then we start into the Defiance illustration series, which took me an entire summer to do. That it started off with technically one that didn't even make the final cut. This piece I will put here. I did this just, I wanted to work on some toned paper, I think was the thing, and do a very minimalistic color. It's that's a ton of white gel pen. So I think this really was just like a white gel pen, that purple color, and white colored pencil, just very minimalistic color scheme here working on the toned paper. So I did that, and then I completely like 180'd on the concept, because you can see that one's a very certain style. You've got lettering on the side, you've got this necklace thing going on to create a nice fluid solid shape. That's when I started really getting into like cut off fluid shapes that were like an all condensed image. Like there was no harsh edges, I guess you could say. It was all like worked into a nice smooth design, which I am still super into, so this is where that started. But yeah, that one was the first one, and then I did the second one, which absolutely looked, I don't actually know why I switched the idea of the more minimalistic palette, but yeah, I did the first two, I think, and then the cast members started fighting over who was gonna be done next, so this turned into like a full-blown summer thing. I was doing at least one of these a week to do all of the cast members, if not multiples, and so there's a bunch of these. I still would stand behind most of them. There might be a few in this that maybe the likeness isn't quite there for them, and I probably could do a better job now, but overall this is sort of when I started perfecting that more realistic look, but it still has that fairly stark line work. All of these were on tone paper. They had acrylic ink outlines and then Prismacolored color pencils over top. I did put them all together in like a mass image after. It's a super fun time for me to look back on, and I've met a whole lot of these people at this point, and I've been able to give them their illustration, which is awesome. And so yeah, I'm pretty happy with all of those still. And then we have this piece, which is another Defiance piece. I started somehow finding more time for extra artwork each week, and this was one of the things. So this is a watercolor painting, which, you know, the surrealistic color scheme is something that I still am very much into. The colors, the color composition, I guess, is quite okay. Here still, I'm sticking by that. The likeness for the people on the woman, like on the right side, it's a little odd. I don't feel like the likeness is there. The man, however, that's a pretty good likeness, I would say. So the color is a little strange. I'm not sure if I would go green on the face now, because I just understand color theory more, and, you know, surrealistic color schemes can work really well a lot of the time, but there are certain colors that regardless still look weird. So here I'm not getting like super Wicked Witch of the West vibes, which is normally what happens when you like throw green on a face, but I probably would stay away from doing a green that strongly on a face now, even if it was such a surrealistic color scheme. So yeah, this was very much like the beginning, I would say, of a lot of concepts that I still use today, with, you know, the more splashy watercolor that's it's still using a lot of white in the piece. There's some gel pen in there, of course, so this isn't, not my favorite. Here we have one, I don't think this would be the first wood plaque that I drew on, but it might have been, because we haven't come across one yet. But yeah, this is one of the earlier, this is when I discovered how incredible it was to draw on a wood plaque. The texture and just the look is really cool. This was, clearly it is a very decorative wood plaque, and definitely a plaque as opposed to like a board or something. It has those fancy edges, you know, good old Michaels for their wood plaques. So yeah, this is literally just straight colored pencil on the wood. I did clearly keep a lot of the wood texture on there still. The filigree design around her, I tried to keep the wood there. It is like shaded in, so there's a little bit of definition, but it's not completely colored in. It looks like, yeah, no, there's still that wood grain showing through. So yeah, this is kind of like, I don't hate the piece. I think the filigree is nice on it, and the flowers are nice. The likeness for her isn't great, but it's not terrible. Scissorhand Splatter. This, I believe, was originally an Inktober piece, and it was literally just India ink, I think, and white gel pen. It's very minimalistic, but the likeness on his, like, considering it's literally just the straight black ink and then the occasional white gel pen bit to bring out some of the highlights and the scissors and stuff, it's pretty good likeness wise. Like, you know exactly who this character is, even though, you know, the line is a little messy, which isn't the end. If I was doing it now, I'd probably try and soften the edge. I mean, I'm pretty sure it was like the edge of the sketchbook, so I didn't have like a lot of space to work with. So a softer edge maybe, but overall the likeness is good. You know, pretty good for, it was a very simple, fast sketch, so yeah, pretty happy with that. Asteria. Now this is actually the first time that I ever in my entire life painted a galaxy. I literally figured out and, like, I don't know, watched YouTube videos or whatever to figure out how to paint a galaxy for this piece. And I mean, I'm sure we can all tell how this ended up. I mean, I'm sure that's actually probably why a lot of you have found my channel, is so through my multitudes of galaxy tutorials at this point, because I don't think there was a lot online at the time, and so I did a lot of like messing around and guesswork, and so once I had a result that looked quite interesting like this, I decided to make tutorials, and then therefore became a YouTuber from that, pretty much. But yeah, because it is quite a sentimental thing because of that being my first galaxy work. I think the galaxy is pretty nice. I don't normally do quite so colorful galaxies now. Like, my favorite part of the galaxy is closer towards her and her hair. It's a little more cohesive color-wise, and when you get down into more of the rainbow look, it starts to get a little patchy and less believable, I guess you could say. So I'm more for the monochromatic, like, tritone, you know, stick to the purples, blues, pink galaxy, but for a first shot for a galaxy, this was pretty good. The one thing with this piece is that the shading on the face is very stark, and it's something that I've thankfully gotten better at. So just the nose shadow is just so intense compared to the rest of the face. The rest of the face is completely stark white. And so now when I do this sort of more surrealistic color effect, I make sure that the generalized area of the rest of the skin or whatever has a little more gradual shading and tones, because even with this being a very pale alien, it should not be that stark white. So it suffers a little there. The nose just feels very straight and not quite, the eye is a little weird there too, so not the like best for likeness and anatomy, and again that shading does kind of really bother me, but the rest of it is quite nice, and I still overall really like this piece. I just personally can see where I have figured out the problems and improved upon over the years. Kaziri, I love this painting. Again, this is just a downhill galaxy from there. Like, every painting that I wanted to do, I wanted to put a galaxy in it because they just look so cool in everything, and they're like so easy to do once you figure it out, and it just looks amazing. And it also worked perfectly for all of this sci-fi artwork that I was doing, so anytime I could feasibly put a galaxy into something, I was absolutely down for it. But yes, I really love this piece. Honestly, I don't think there's anything really that I would improve upon, maybe making that transition between the character, I guess, halo effect around the character and the outer space. But concept-wise, I'm still really in love with this. If you've seen the show, the character can sort of like force float stones around, but then I started to have the stones gradually transition into the spaceships, and so concept-wise I really still like this. It possibly could have been a little smoother, but overall I still really love this painting. And then we have the Mother of Time Travel, which is actually the second piece in that series, with the one with the half gear face. This one was a colored pencil on a very intricate cut wood plaque. This I still really like. It's actually still hanging above my desk. It's kind of like my good luck piece, I guess you could say. It's been above my desk since I finished it, and it has moved from studio to studio actually. So yeah, I still overall really like this piece. It maybe is a bit busy for me now with the crazy laser cut wood plaque. It is completely filled up with gears, and I'm not sure you can really tell that they are gears or cogs, so if I was to do this now I might do something a little different there so that it's not really competing with each other. But overall the likeness is pretty good. There's maybe a little bit of weirdness for the anatomy I feel like might be a bit off, but I'm not entirely sure what the reference photo for this looks like. But overall I still am really happy with this piece. I mean, I see it every single day. It's literally over there, so if I absolutely despise it I'd probably hide it away in a closet or something. This is again where the Defiance artwork started to ramp up. The new season was coming out, so I started to produce some more and more artwork for that, and reflecting the new images, characters, all of that fun stuff. But this piece overall I'm still quite happy with. I really started to like doing that like geometric design on the face, where it sort of like is like the polygons, kind of like a 3D model effect look. And then of course you can see they're all like breaking off in shards. I feel like I could improve upon that concept a little bit now. I feel like the shards are a little too confined to the box. I'd probably make them a little more random and look like they were sort of floating off into the distance a bit more. It's very edge heavy, I guess you could say, with those triangles and polygons floating off. You definitely can tell where the edge is because they're confined within that. So I'd like to make that a little more loose and not as obvious. But yeah, other than that, I feel like the likeness is good, the anatomy is good, the values in this are really good. I know the lighting is a little weird, and that one piece sort of is shifting a little towards the green, which isn't great, but this was specifically, the reference for this was specifically off of certain promotional pictures for the season, and that was the color scheme for that, so that is why that was a thing. So it's maybe a little green, but I don't feel like you're getting that like Wicked Witch of the West vibes. It's more on the yellow-green area. So yeah, overall pretty happy with that still. And again, you can see where this is going. I then just wanted to polygon everybody, but this you can see the triangles are fading a little more smoothly. They don't feel as confined to the shape of the paper or whatever as much. The polygons really don't match up with the like structure of the face, so I might, if I was to do any more polygon pictures now, I might change that so that they sort of fell in line with the curves and stuff of the shape a little more. Some of these are okay, and others are just kind of like, feels like it's slapped onto the face as opposed to really following the shape, but again, that could be a stylized choice whether you want it to really follow those lines or not. But yeah, overall, this is quite an interesting, cool piece, I feel like. The anatomy is a little weird. I feel like the mouth is a little askew from the nose and stuff, but concept-wise, I still think this is quite strong. Another Defiance piece, and here's where started the obsession of the orange cloak, which I now actually own that prop. The one they used in the show, it's hanging in my closet. If you've seen in my closet on any videos, tours, etc., that is the actual cloak they used in the show. And here's where the obsession started. So yeah, again, this feels a little wonky. Like, I like the play of the blue and the orange, you know, opposing colors. It works very well there. The hair is a little weird. Everyone just, their likeness, I feel like, isn't quite there. Everyone feels a little askew to me. But actually, the watercolor texture that I achieved on this is quite nice. The fur on the cloak itself, the patterning on the one vest to the person on the right, it's just basically watercolor, like little swatch things. That's very nice. It did look like it's a very simple effect, but it's a nice texture. So there are good parts of this. It's just overall, it's kind of like a nothing great piece for me. Terra Nova. This I almost destroyed my arm and my Prismacolor collection on. This, you would never know, but this is actually on a wood panel. It's quite large. Does this say how big it is? Yeah, it's an 18 by 18 wood panel. And that entire background, as you can see, is Galaxy. This is, I basically came up, I don't think there was a single person on the internet that had attempted to do Galaxy with colored pencil at this point, and for good reason, because it's quite unpleasant on the arm, especially if you are someone like me who is prone to, you know, carpal tunnel tendonitis, all of that fun stuff. Not a great idea, so this did nearly kill me, but overall it's kind of a pretty cool concept. I'm not sure if the Galaxy really lends itself to this piece for any particular reason other than I was just really into galaxies at the time. The Galaxy looks nice and cool, but the cut face idea, the concept was the different alien species in the show sort of had their own sliver, and the cut effect of them and how everything lines up is still quite nice, and the shading on them still feels quite nice. The Galaxy isn't the greatest. I like the lower section with the orangey areas, feels a lot more realistic Galaxy to me than the like cloud formations above. It just feels a little stiff overall now. But yeah, this was the piece that I had to figure out how to do a Galaxy with colored pencils, and also why I probably have a decent YouTube audience as well. And this is when I sort of started to discover that I really like the style of Art Nouveau, the just cut off borders, the intricate details that could surround people, characters, a portrait, all of that stuff. So I really like this piece. Again, that orange cloak. So overall, I think this piece is very well balanced. There could maybe be a bit more detail on the orange cloak, but overall the likeness of these characters I feel like is there. The background yellow is a little weird. I'm not sure what I was going for there. It's like kind of scratchy and it's a bit textured. I'm not sure if it's supposed to be like a flat color, if I wanted it to have a bit of texture there, but The patterning in the background, I'm pretty sure it's all actually traditional. I probably did my like half and half transfer thing that I started to develop with the tracing, or not, yeah, with tracing paper, where you like draw one side, you trace it on the tracing paper, and then you can transfer it onto the other side. So for that sense, it looks pretty even. Like if I really stared at it, I could see like a few discrepancies between the patterning, but for a traditional like mirrored, incredibly detailed effect, it's pretty solid. Here we have a tiny Howl's Moving Castle circle scenery thing, which I thought I was going to have an entire series doing these like a small, they're not very big, I mean they're bigger than I can show, I don't know, like baseball size circle little landscapes from Studio Ghibli movies, but I'm pretty sure this was actually the only one I ever did. But overall I think it's actually quite a nice piece. You know, you can tell exactly what it is. This is watercolor with, I believe, some colored pencil over top. But yeah, overall, I think this is quite a nice scene study, and I'd like to do more of these, I guess, if I want to like pick this up after absolutely years of not doing any of these. But yeah, I really like painting Studio Ghibli movie scenes and landscapes, and just scenery as like a nice practice chill out thing. Landscapes are like a very chill out thing for me, because I don't know if it's not that I don't care as much, but you can get away with a lot more with landscape paintings than you can like portraits and stuff, because, you know, if you don't perfectly copy down a rock, it's not going to be like the end. This is the Defiance Season 3 poster that I did. So concept-wise, I think it's quite a strong poster design, but if you start looking at the faces, again, I don't know what got into me this summer. It's like my likeness for people, especially because you've seen how reasonably frequently I was drawing these people, just plummeted. The values aren't really there. I'm not sure how like aware I was of like the concept of values and how that would really make things pop more and stuff, or if I was just more worried about capturing the accurate colors more than the values, which is a whole other video conversation to be had. But concept-wise, for a poster, I think this is quite interesting. It got all of the main characters on there. There is a nice transition between the upper sky piece down to the St. Louis Arch and those characters surrounding it. The best part, and even like after I finish this, I still feel the best part of this painting is the top space section. The characters there, I feel like, turned out the best. The lighting on them, the likeness of them, they just really pop well. Of course, the galaxy, I feel like solid galaxy. The lower area where it's more of a confined scene is quite nice. It has a lot of nice detail in there, and again, those portraits are quite small, and I feel like that was a pretty good I did a reasonable job capturing the accuracy of that scene, I guess you could say, in those characters. But all of the bigger ones, they just feel completely flat value-wise to me, and there's definitely anatomy and likeness issues. But this is actually still hanging in my room, so I don't hate it that much, clearly. This, I think, is interesting concept-wise. It's just, again, sort of like a nothing piece. The anatomy, like the braid feels very flat. I like the swatch, like duo tone idea, where the paint is like a paint swatch across her, but you still see the detail and the shading in the different areas. So concept-wise there, I think it's quite interesting, and I might do something like that in the future. It's just kind of like a nothing piece with anatomy issues. This, I think, is actually in a sketchbook, but overall I still quite like this piece. It's a little flat, like the skin tones aren't great. The hair is a little, like, it feels like it's stuck on a bit, but the line work in the hair, especially on the more yellow haired girl, I like the line work on this, and this is still something that I would do something very similar to, and this is just sort of the beginning stages of when I was figuring things out more, I guess, and not quite reaching these certain areas that I have figured out how to perfect more now, or just do better now. I wouldn't say perfect, but just, you know, this was the beginning stages of that style for me. The Countess, one of the only American Horror Story. I have been obsessed with American Horror Story for like 10 years, but somehow this was like the only artwork I ever managed to bother doing until like recently. you know, massive Lady Gaga fan. So this, I do remember the gold ink for this, like the effect overall is very nice. I still really like it. It's that Art Deco hotel style. So concept wise, I'm quite into this still, but I do remember that gold ink. It is the Winsor & Newton gold drawing ink or whatever it's called. That gold ink, nightmare. You have to shake that stuff up like every minute of use if you want to get even anything remotely metallic looking on the page. Clearly it made an impression on me because I still remember how bad that ink was for this. But yeah, overall, the likeness on Gaga, quite okay. She's quite a small, this is only like a 9x12 piece, so her head is like probably that big, not very large at all. So overall, her dress could use a little more definition, I guess, but it was a very flat, black, dark dress, I'm pretty sure, for the reference photo, so keeping it a little lighter so that you could see some of that line work and detail that I put in was probably the best option there. Yeah, overall, I still quite like this piece. Here we have another Gaga one. This one I believe was originally an Inktober piece, and this one pains me slightly. Obviously for Inktober, I was not expecting to do like a masterpiece work, so this is quite simple, you know, those lights in the background, just like white gel pen on black paper, like straight gel pen. There's no like shading to be had, it's just line art, and then Gaga in the foreground, which looks like she's colored pencil, so a little more definition there, but overall, very simple piece. This was, for years, my most popular tweet because the American Horror Story Twitter retweeted it, and like, I spent so much more time and effort on that other Gaga American Horror Story piece that this one getting all of the like hype killed me for a long time. It still might be like my second most popular tweet ever. I don't know. I really don't want to look because I'm sure it would pain me because, you know, it's always the pieces you put zero time and effort into that do well, isn't it? And again, we have another wood plaque art. This has also technically started to become more of a series, though it was like a very low-key, unplanned series. But yeah, again, this was a colored pencil on a wood plaque. The galaxy, however, is some sort of pastel. I believe it might have been pastel pencil and not like straight pastel. This, I think the values and shading on the face are starting to get a lot better. I started to understand values a lot better at this point, so I had more of a gradual transition for where I possibly previously would have thought would have been like almost stark white, and really focused on that highlight so that it really popped. But anatomy wise, I don't feel like it's the best. I feel like the face is a little skewed weird in a few areas, but the values on this are excellent. She really does look like she's coming off of the page because of those like really stark white highlights compared to the rest of her face. And the line art on the hair is actually quite nice as well. It's pretty involved. So aside from the anatomy issues, this is actually quite a nice piece. Here we have the Carol piece. Again, a pretty simple design. The likeness on Carol isn't bad, but Therese is... what is her face doing? Their face is a little wonky on both of them. I remember that plaid scarf nearly killed me though. Just textured patterned fabric that wraps in weird angles, not fun. The color play on the both of them, with Carol being very golden and Therese being more like cool toned. It's a very like nice color palette, but you know, not my best work and wonky faces. Furiosa art. This I still actually really like. Likeness wise, it's kind of like in the middle, like there's no obvious anatomy issues, but it also kind of just doesn't quite feel full realism. I don't know, the watercolor splashes surrounding the character are quite pleasant, and that effect with blowing through a straw and getting those like splattery, spidery leg type of things really works well. It's not overdone, I guess you could say, so it feels pretty balanced there, and the play on the warmer tones of Furiosa versus the blue is quite nice. So, you know, I'm actually pretty happy with how this still looks. What do you know? This I actually still quite like. It's not like a super complicated or serious piece, but I really like the color scheme in this. I still use this color palette a lot in pieces. I kind of call it the like minimalistic or rainbow adjacent, where you take, you know, it's still like quite a variety of colors here, but they aren't quite the traditional rainbow colors. So, you know, we have a bright yellow, like opera pink, more of like a purple lake sort of thing, an ultramarine, and then that like really cool dark teal. So overall, you know, the anatomy on this one looks quite nice. The concept is kind of nothing interesting, but the color palette I do really like. This I still really like. Again, that color scheme that I was talking about, rainbow adjacent. You know, this is pretty, I don't want to say simple concept-wise. There's obviously quite a lot of detail in the clocks and the cogs and stuff, and like the filigree off to the one side. And overall, it's pretty much just almost the watercolor splattered over top without really any rhyme or reason. There's not much shading or anything to be had in terms of like values. It's just kind of like color splashed over top of it, with keeping the characters in the foreground more white, and so that it balances off of the color and they stand out more. But yeah, overall, I actually still really like this piece. You know, for what the piece is, it seems to be executed well. There's nothing in particular that I would change. This one kind of has an interesting story, because this was like a very random, I don't know if you would call it experimental piece, but I kind of just wanted to play with paints and somehow got to this result, and I thought I was like a friggin' artistic genius, because this looked nothing like I had done. I don't even know why I thought I was an artistic genius for this, but for some reason this was like the piece for a long time that I was striving towards, to try and do something like that. I just thought it was like so creative with like the really stark white highlights that I'm pretty sure I did actually masking fluid out, which is why they are so stark, but just the different textures. I don't know, for some reason this one was just like the top tier painting for me, and now I'm kind of like, Again, those highlights are a little too stark. It's a very like interesting graphic design wise. I'm sure there's a lot of people that might like that very stark separation of like using the white and the highlights and stuff, but it just now is not something I would necessarily do. But actually the values in the person's face to the right are actually quite nice. You start getting that better tone value in the face. But yeah, I do, again, it's still like that sentimental thing, because I know how like attached to this painting I was, and thinking this was like, I was never going to get to something that was like this creative again, but I don't particularly absolutely love this piece anymore. Yeah, it's interesting to go back and see that. This one, Nocturne, I still really love this piece. This is honestly probably still in my top 10 paintings maybe. I'm not sure what my top 10 paintings consists of, but you know, my top works, this is definitely one that I would still consider being amongst my favorites. I know it's like a pretty simple concept, but just all of it and everything together just really works for me. It's kind of galaxy, it's more just like a gradient with some like a stars effect, but the shape of the hair tendrils that come off of it, I think the shape that they create is just very pleasing. The skin tones look quite nice. The values and shading on the face still feels quite and looks quite nice to me. There's no obvious anatomy issues. So yeah, just overall, I still really, really love this painting. Love is love. This actually apparently right now is on the front page of DeviantArt, which I did not know until I went on here to look at these pieces. But yes, this was like a Pride Month piece, which yay, happy Pride Month again. So perfect time to be talking about this. But yeah, I still really like this piece. It's a pretty simple concept, you know, the two hands that are in the pride flag rainbow that then sort of cut off and then swoop around to look like the shape of a heart. The surrounding area of the heart feels a little stark, but again, I'm not sure what I would do differently if I was doing that. Honestly, the only reason I would like mess with this piece would be to add the other colors that are now present in the pride flag. Yeah, overall I still really like this piece, and design-wise it is still quite interesting to me. And here we have the Women of Star Wars series, which All of these I really still like. The only reason I would really mess with any of these, in particular Rei, is because when I did these, a lot of the characters, like their overall story arc had finished, or I had a really good idea of, you know, their, I guess, main portrait versus the like image on their back. And for Rei it might change just because, you know, she had 2 more movies past the time that I painted this, but overall this is actually a series that I would love to add to, and I constantly say that, and I still for multiple years at this point have not had an opportunity to add to it. But when I do hopefully get a chance to do that, the concept is staying the same, with like the double exposure sort of look of the main portrait and then a very important scene to the character or something. Even when I did these 6, there were other characters that I really wanted to add, like Sabine and Hera and stuff, and I just decided to cut it off at the 6 because the other character stories like hadn't finished yet, and I didn't want to like preemptively do them and then realize that this like other part of the story would have made like a great part on their back or whatever. So yeah, I definitely want to continue this series in the future. This piece I really like. This I did in an obscene timeline. I like stayed up all night and did the whole thing. Like, I was probably up working on this until like 5 in the morning. I just like blew through it because I had this really strong concept in mind and just had to do it then. And I really, really like this piece still. I think it's quite interesting, the angle that I chose to draw it at. If anything, the only thing I think I would change now is maybe make that a little less intense. It feels very like diagonal on the corners of the, it wasn't actually canvas, it was a wood panel, but the lines feel very in line with those perpendicular corners, and I would probably skew it so that they just fell on an angle but on the long flat edges instead. It's moody, atmospheric, the colors play nicely. I just, you know, it's just a very cool piece that I still really like. This I still am quite happy with. If anything, I wish that their heads weren't cut off on the one side, so that was just me drawing it off to one side, not too evenly, but color scheme wise, again, that color scheme that I keep on going back to and still really like. There isn't any shading or values really to be had on their faces, but for this I think it actually works quite well because it means they are standing out very well from their hair. I still actually quite like this, and the line art in the hair isn't too overdone, and it feels like it flows very nicely, and it's a very pleasing color scheme to me still. I just wish it was in the middle of the page a little more. This one is also quite cool and I still like it. This, again, not entirely sure why I did this, but I wanted to try like the Alien H.R. Giger style, but like as an original painting concept, and I think I definitely achieved that look. Again, there's nothing in particular that I would want to change with this. There's a ton of detail in this one, which again is that style and that ship effect of like all of the crazy like biomechanical things that he would draw, and I feel like if you know like the Alien and H.R. Giger style, that's probably immediately what you think of when you see this. So in that regard, it was quite successful. Wicked game. This is still hanging in my studio. This I still really like. I like the concept of it. It's a very simplistic color palette with like a very interesting geometric design around it, and just, yeah, overall I love the shape of the hair. Just, this is still very pleasing to me, and I still have it hanging up. So again, if it bothered me that badly, it would be shoved somewhere where I'd never see it again. And that's actually the last piece that I posted on DeviantArt, so that's probably a good place to stop this. So thank you for joining me while I took a look back at some of my older pieces. I tried not to be too harsh on myself because I know I was at the very beginning stages of my real artistic journey, and I've definitely, thankfully, learned a lot since then, and I'm sure if I looked back, you know, in 10 years on the pieces I'm doing now, I'm gonna think they're all garbage too. But in the comments, you know, just feel free to tear all those pieces to shreds. But that is everything, so thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video.